This is a summary of week 3. The lecture is Patrick Lecture 209, Next Steps on the Path. And this section focuses on what the guide gently refers to as one of the next steps. I didn't delineate because the guide describes them as overlapping, happening concurrently, and not necessarily in sequential order. One of them is that learning, that giving is receiving. This can be difficult because we have forcing currents inside us of what we want to accomplish in life, what we need, what we want, and how to get there. So the guide says, only as you give can you receive. He also says, if you can't receive, you can't give, meaning that it doesn't matter whether it's giving or receiving, where you have hardened channels of what you will receive and what you won't, what you will give and what you won't. You know, the proportion, how much, when, where. If you've got ingrained controls over this process, over the flow of your life, then you're going to restrict. You may get something and you may receive something. This section is about doing better, to relaxing and opening up to a larger amount of the flow of life. We won't be completely free of this while we're human. Humans have constrictions. But the idea is that you can open to the flow and you can open safely. This is not about giving yourself away or just shut up and receive. This is about focusing on the natural flow. So that includes the constrictions include your judgments on what pleases me. If it doesn't please me and I judge it as bad, then that justifies my excluding it. I'm thinking of photograph albums and Facebook pages. We have a tendency to post the happy moments, and this is a skewed view of life. In reality, it is I'm going to call it the minor notes, the discordant notes that create a real life situation, not just the pleasing melody. So that by using constrictions, even if they sound reasonable, like that hurts or it displeases us, we eliminate aspects of life that we need to balance the flow, that we need to be in reality about the flow. So one of the tools that I picked based on what I read in the lecture was the idea of mutuality, which is a lecture. And mutuality is a tool, or I can treat it as a tool. Mutuality can be started off like the idea of children writing a thank you note. Of course, there's no meaning in it. I got told to write it. I have to write it. I resent it. It's a task. I don't know what to say. It sounds phony, but it makes my parents happy. That's not a real thank you note. It becomes thank you notes. Sometimes kids have to do unpleasant chores, or what to them are unpleasant, in order to help them understand its meaning to others. Sometimes when we do something that we don't like to do, and we find out that it really made a difference to people, it changes how we look at that task. So we may think the task is onerous and tiresome, but when someone tells us heartfeltly how it affected them, and thank you very much, the task is not so onerous. We begin to understand more of a unified perspective of it. One example is that when I went to the recent International Pathwork Conference in Portugal, I went in part because I've never been to Portugal, in part because I hadn't been to a conference in over 6 years. And I'm not trying to downplay the conference. I'm saying that it wasn't just for the conference. There there was more to it, which is okay. I can still be present and give just because there were multiple reasons for my attending. But what blew me away were the number of people. Now, I'm going to qualify that and say 10 out of 300. Now, that number may be right, but it gives you the idea. It wasn't 50 people out of 300, 10 out of 300 came up deliberately to me, specifically to me, and thanked me for these videos. Now, YouTube videos are not my thing, but I know that it matters to others, and so I started them in an attempt to meet the needs of others, where the page may be a little bit too thick and confusing and abstract. Sometimes a human voice helps. Again, not my strength, not my personal interest all the time, but I understand it. It's the same way movies speak to me more than novels on occasion. Trying not to lose my place. So these 10 people that came up to me, I have to admit I was overwhelmed. I know that there are subscribers to the YouTube channel, but I never meet them. I don't know who they are. And I had no idea that these mattered so much. Now, let's bring that back around to mutuality. May not be my thing, helps others. And doing them develops skills so that it becomes easier for me. And people say it's easy. I'm saying, no, it's not easy. It's a learned skill. You have to ramp up. These don't always work. I admit that. But in mutuality, it is my intention to move towards unity that matters more than, well, come over here. I do very well over here in the written word. Come over and do it my way. That's not a clean intention. That's a very narrow intention to make it easy for me. So, example of mutuality. The other thing that happened during the conference that I think references this is that they had an art exhibit table at the back of this large conference room. And it was an art table with art supplies and so forth, and pre-cut ovals with a point on them, tear-shaped pieces of paper, large, about that big. And the invitation was that every drop in the ocean matters. That's what it was called, drop in the ocean. And you were invited at any time during the 5 days to go back to that table and design your drop and post it on the wall. It was beautiful. It really was beautiful. It manifests a lot of teachings in the path work about how we all matter, that manifesting positive intention is more important than an individual can understand. You cannot get the meaning of all your positive intentions. It's too much for the human mind, and we need validation to know. So I intellectually knew that some people were watching the videos, but I hadn't heard from people, and they may not be comfortable typing an email. It was powerful. For every 10 people who speak up, could be 10,000 people out there, I don't know. But they motivated me. They helped me understand that there was meaning, even though I still feel awkward doing these. The other thing about drop in the ocean is it's similar to the idea of random acts of kindness. Now, random acts of kindness is a practice I advocate because when people say, I don't make a difference in the world, try. When you make random acts of kindness, when you simply look for a place to be kind, to manifest kindness, to display kindness, exercise kindness, practice kindness, you don't know what the difference is until you do it. This is not an intellectual exercise. You may do it 100 times and get one response. My suggestion to you is that doing it 100 times changes you if you do it with an open heart. And the one response you may get is very validating. It's very powerful. Remember that most people don't respond. Most people take and go on or presume that the kindness is deserved and move on. They'll receive but not give back. But some people stop and they want to give what they received. So my recommendation is to consider the drop in the ocean theory. It matters. To practice random acts of kindness, and to consider that the judgment that I don't matter is a very narrow human perspective. And it's irrational to presume that spirit lives only in the mind of the human, that it only manifests in proof, in materialism, which is listed as one of the evils in Patrick Lecture 248. I think it's 248. It might be 246. I think it's 248. I'm getting old. I forget the lecture numbers now. So drop in the ocean, practicing acts of kindness, and not demanding that everything you do feed you back equally, like a kid saying, my piece of pie must be the same size as your piece of pie. Another tool or another way to look at this is using visualization, Patrick Lecture 210, which teaches that you have to imagine some aspect of it in order to grow into it. So again, like a child's thank you note process, you may have to practice awkwardly before you realize that your skill is increasing, before you realize that with skill comes pleasure. I read a recent article about flow and a neurological study of flow in the human mind. And flow happens when we are so practiced at something that we don't have to think about it. And this is what happens if you really incorporate pathwork concepts. You live it, you breathe it in and out. My hands just went the opposite way, but you get the idea. That you have to visualize it and then you have to start a process. And at some point, it becomes easier. Whether it's easy or not, that depends on the circumstances. I sometimes tease people that my ability to teach the concepts comes from constant practice. Now, when I studied piano, I failed for many reasons. Number one, I have no talent. Number two, I have hand-eye coordination issues. But thirdly, I didn't practice. So I could have made more progress, but I didn't practice. It wasn't fun, so I didn't do it. Some people are more inspired to practice and they get better. They may just get to the point where they can play for joy or for friends at a party, but you can't get there without practice. So what I am recommending is that in this section on giving is receiving, you need to practice. Practice receiving, if that is an issue for you. Practice giving, if that is an issue for you. Practice being able to flow back and forth without trying to make them even, if that is an issue for you. And I was pleased at my response at the conference because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have been overwhelmed and just wanted to stop the flow. I'm overwhelmed, I must stop your flow. And that would have looked like I wasn't appreciative or that they weren't doing it right. You see, you don't know how other people are going to take your stopping the flow. They'll take it personally. And I was very pleased with myself where I could receive openly to the point where sometimes I didn't even respond because I was in the joy of receiving. I really was. How lovely for you to say that. And I'm going to take it in like we'd take in a delicious foodstuff and really get everything I can out of this mouthful. Now, people do need validation. I did remember to thank them, but they can see it, they can feel it. So if you want to know that giving is receiving and vice versa, practice it. Don't practice it big, because big is a way of saying I gave a big effort, I want big results. It can't be helped when we're extending ourselves too far, further than we are comfortable with, that we will be disappointed in the results. Stay small. Keep it small. There was a practice I remember from years ago where they suggested do 5 or 10 random acts a day. Now, for most of us, that's an idea. So we're going to go back to daily review. How about focusing your daily review for a week or two on tracking how many acts of kindness you really attempted and the results and your feelings about it, etc., so that you don't forget. That's the idea. Now, if you do it mentally, that's fine. A lot of times when you do it mentally, you forget. When you do it in writing, at least for a short period of time, it's there. You can go back to it. But you can also notice that despite your desire to do it, you only did it 3 times instead of 5 or 10. So I advocate written forms of reminders. I use an awful lot of Post-it notes in my life. I presume that my positive intention to use them to remind me will be okay for the trees and the production carbon values and how complicated the planet is. I can't fix the planet, but if I am serving a positive intention, that is fixing the planet. Just not necessarily in a way that makes me feel like I've done something specific for the day. So spiritual work is about a different dimension. And I invite you to consider that you don't control and you may not fully understand that dimension, but you will be able to feel it, sense it, once you stop being so earthbound in terms of proof, materialism, validation, judgment, worry, self-criticism, criticism of others, that once you relax these forcing currents and issues and restrictions, you will better be able to feel the flow, engage with the flow, and then enjoy it. Like the article said, you have to be somewhat practiced at it before it becomes easy. Example I often use is driving a car. I was a terrible driving student. I terrified my instructors. I had a hard time managing all these things. I got better. I've driven safely for years and years and years. You can begin to drive what feels like unconsciously. Same thing with riding a bike, but even walking down the street. We don't focus on every step unless there's something wrong with our knees or we're in pain. We don't think about every single step, but we can enter into an ease about walking. Same thing happens with running. There's a flow to that, or any other activity that you do. So if this seems hard, the giving versus receiving intellectual path or concept thing, find that same concept in something else. Find it in baking. Some people cook without thinking. Some people knit without thinking. I find that impossible. There are many things people can do without thinking that came with practice. Find what you do and just notice that it wasn't easy perhaps in the beginning. Consider what you had to overcome and that there was a reason, there was a motivation. So the motivation here is to put your drop in the ocean, to exercise your positive intention, and that spiritually, this matters a great deal, far more than you can ever realize. So that's my thing on next steps on the path, learning that giving is receiving and that receiving is giving. Thanks for listening. Hope you read the lecture.